I heard of a case of two 15-year-old boys. They were wearing uniform and were firing away with the rest, but they were taken prisoners. A corporal in hospital told me that. They were wearing soldiers' uniforms, so what could one do? And I myself have seen that there are 12-year-old boys in the Russian army, in the band, for instance, wearing uniform. We once captured a Russian military band, and they played wonderfully. It was almost too much for you. There was such a depth of feeling and yearning in their music. It conjured up pictures of the vastness of Russia. It was terrific. It thrilled me through and through. It was a military band. To get back to the story, the two boys were told to get back westward and to keep on the road. If they tried to run into the woods at the first bend of the road, they would get a bullet in them. And they were scarcely out of sight when they slunk off the road, and in a flash they'd disappeared. A large detachment was immediately sent to look for them, but they couldn't find them. And then they caught the two boys. Those were the two. Our people behaved well and didn't kill them there and then. They took them before the concentration camp again. Now it was clear that they'd done for themselves. They were made to dig their own graves, 2 pits, and then one of them was shot. He didn't fall into the grave, he fell forwards over it. The other was told to push the first one into the pit before he was shot himself. And he did so, smiling. A boy of 15. There's fanaticism and idealism for you. This story, as told by Staff Sergeant Schmidt on June the 20th, 1942, typifies how the soldiers talk in the protocols. As in all everyday conversations, the speaker repeatedly changes the subject, following a chain of associations. In the middle, when Schmidt is talking about music, it occurs to him how much he enjoys Russian music, whereupon he briefly describes it before continuing his narrative. Schmidt's anecdote begins harmlessly enough, but turns truly horrific at the end with the execution of the 2 young Russian soldiers. The narrator reports that not only were the 2 youths murdered, they were made to dig their own graves. The execution runs into a complication, and that leads to the eventual moral of the story. The young soldier about to be killed proves fanatic or idealistic, eliciting the staff sergeant's admiration. At first glance, what we have here is a spectacular combination of topics: war, enemy, soldiers, youths, music, Russian expanses, crimes against humanity, and admiration for one's adversary, that don't seem to cohere, yet they're narrated in a single breath. That is the first thing we need to recognize. The stories we'll be examining in this book deviate from what we expect. They were not intended to be well-rounded, consistent, or logical. They were told to create excitement, elicit interest, or provide space and opportunity for the interlocutor to add commentary or stories of his own. In this respect, as is true for all everyday conversations, the soldiers' stories tend to jump around in interesting ways. They're full of ruptures and sidebar narratives, and they aim to establish consensus and agreement. People do not converse solely in order to exchange information, but to create a relationship with one another, establishing commonalities and assuring themselves that they are experiencing one and the same world. The soldier's world is that of war. That is what makes their conversations seem so extraordinary to listeners today. For the soldiers themselves, they were perfectly normal. The brutality, harshness, and absence of emotion of war are omnipresent, and that is what is so disturbing for us listening to the dialogues today, more than 60 years after the fact. Involuntarily, we can only shake our heads in dismay and frequent incomprehension. Yet in order to understand the world of these soldiers, and not just our own world, we need to get beyond such moral reactions. The matter-of-factness with which extreme acts of brutality are related shows that killing and the worst sorts of violence were part of the narrator's and the audience's everyday reality. The POWs discussed such topics for hours on end, but they also conversed about aeroplanes, bombs, radar devices, cities, landscapes, and women. Mueller. When I was at Kharkiv, the whole place had been destroyed, except the centre of the town. It was a delightful town, a delightful memory. Everyone spoke a little German. They'd learned it at school. At Taganrog, too, there were splendid cinemas and wonderful cafes on the beach. We did a lot of flying near the junction of the Don and the Donuts. It's beautiful.